Interesting. All right, Christine, thank you. New, higher resolution surveillance videotape from the night that Trayvon Martin was killed. The video shows George Zimmerman in handcuffs. Roughly 30 minutes after the shooting, the tape's been enhanced, and some people say they can see red marks on the back of George Zimmerman's head, kind of on the really almost like the top of his head. And it could support Zimmerman's story that he was attacked by Martin. Others say they don't really see any blood, and you certainly don't see any bandages or serious injuries right there. This morning we speak to Frank Taffe. He's George Zimmerman's friend and neighbor, also a former neighborhood watch block captain. Nice to see you. Thanks for talking with us. We appreciate it. So give me a sense of how much you talked to George Zimmerman. Have you spoken to him since the shooting?
No, he left me a voicemail approximately about a week and a half ago. I did see the videotape, and Soledad, it's clear that there are welts or gashes on the back of his head. I saw that. And one thing I would like to bring up is that the EMTs, they administered first aid at the scene, which was our residence. Therefore, when he was in the care, custody, and control of the Sanford Police Department, they ensured his care through the efforts of the Seminole County Emergency Services. That's why you don't see him like he came out of a 12-round fight like Rocky Balboa against Apollo Creed.
You also don't see him with but you don't see him with even a Band-Aid on his head. You know, it looks like there's a laceration from that enhanced videotape, but there's no bandage. There's no, there's no some kind of something covering his head. And if he was seen by paramedics, if it was a really terrible gash, one wouldn't necessarily be over the line in suggesting that a Band-Aid or some kind of a wrap or a bandage would be indicative of a very serious head injury.
I'm not a medical expert, but I've had gashes on my head, contusions, that the bleeding had cessated at some point, and we got to remember that they were there for a duration of time in which the paramedics administered first aid before they released him to the police to go downtown. So you're not going to see as graphic as America wants to see a bloodied T-shirt, whatever you all are looking for. He did sustain,
So that amount of time, but let me stop you there for 1 second, and I totally hear you on that, and I'm not sure what America wants to see, but I'll say I do think that there is a time stamp on that police video.
Well, they want to see something to, I know, but they do want to see, some sort of blood. They want to see some sort of gore. Well,
I think
before he was released.
My sense is, and then I'll ask you a question on the other side of it, that when someone claims that they've been slammed against concrete for a solid minute, that people would think that there are injuries to the head that would be consistent with that. And so I guess what people are trying to see is, are those injuries consistent with being slammed?
Look at the tape again.
But not a Band-Aid. Do you see a Band-Aid or a bandage on it?
No, I did not see a bandage, but I did see welts, I did see swelling, I did see cuts, all consistent with Zimmerman, George's story.
Of having his head slammed on concrete for a minute. Okay, so let's move on for 1 second, because I want to talk to you about your neighborhood. I know that you've been quoted in the paper as talking about some burglaries and the safety.
Neighborhood. Yeah, that's a great word, neighborhood.
What do you mean?
Well, we had 8 burglaries in our neighborhood, all perpetrated by young black males in the 15 months prior to Trayvon being shot.
So
one of those, it would have been 9. There would have been 9, but George Zimmerman, through his efforts of being a neighborhood watch captain, helped stop one in progress. Documented in the 9/11 calls, February 2nd, my house was being robbed, and George, on his nightly rounds, watched this burglary in progress, called Sanford PD, waited for him, and helped ensure that nothing bad happened to my house. And it's documented, the 9/11 call for February 2nd. That was my residence.
So that was
George
the
Zimmerman helped stop.
Let's talk about the 8 prior ones. You said that of the 8 prior ones, they were perpetrated by young black men? How many of those cases did they arrest people? How many of those cases were people actually convicted?
One I know where the perpetrator was apprehended. It was a daylight robbery in January of this year. The young black male went in during the daytime, just 2 houses down from where my place was. And he was apprehended 5 days later by the Sanford police on a tip from the general repair folks that were working on our homes, who watched the whole thing go down.
So it sounds to me like you're saying that it made sense to you that George Zimmerman would be fearful of young black men.
No, it would be consistent that the perpetrators were all of the young black male ID.
Say that one more time.
That's a fact.
What do you mean? It would be consistent? I don't understand what you're saying.
All of the perpetrators of the burglaries, the prior burglaries, were young black males.
And so when he saw Trayvon Martin, in your mind, it would make perfect sense to say he's a young black male. He probably is Robert. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you know, there's an old saying that if you plant corn, you get corn.
I don't know that saying, so I'm going to have to ask you to tell me what that means. If you plant corn, you get corn. What does that mean in this case?
It is what it is. It is what it is. I would go on record by stating that of the 8 prior burglaries in the 15 months prior to the Trayvon Martin shooting, all of the perpetrators were young black males.
You've mentioned one.
You can make of that what?
One that you're talking about in your particular case of your house, and then you mentioned one other.
Right.
So far, I think you're talking about 2 men, which I'd have to then confirm. But my question for you is, I'm trying to connect the dots to what that means for that night and that shooting. Are you saying that because there was a sense that young black men...
I used the phrase, and no disrespect to George Clooney, but it was a perfect storm.
Meaning
that,
what?
All the ingredients were set up. You know, the prior burglaries were committed or perpetrated by young black males. Mm-hmm. George was on his rounds, and it was, first of all, Soledad, it's a tragedy, okay? I'm not condoning the use of the lethal weapon in this case. Let me just out that. Secondly, it was just a perfect storm that all of the components were there for this tragedy to transpire.
Hey, Frank, this is Will Kane. Can I ask you a quick question? With that knowledge that you're sharing with us right now, that you'd had 8 previous robberies, by your definition, by young black men, had you at your neighborhood watch meetings talked about this? Had you guys paid particular attention to that and said, let's be on the lookout for young black men in the neighborhood?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
What you just shared with us, was that something of discussion within your neighborhood watch and your meetings? Did you guys talk about, we have been robbed 8 times in the past 10 months, or had robberies by young black men, we need to be paying attention?
No, young black men were never the topic of discussion.
Right.
It was just the fact that we had been robbed.
Can I ask you?
It was never brought up that one. Huh?
I'm sorry, Frank, let me ask you one other question. You said this, you were quoted in the New York Times talking about these burglaries. You said this, you said they were Trayvon-like dudes with their pants down. So I think part of that means with baggy pants. That's a misquote from the New York Times?
I never said that. Yes, it is.
Okay.
I never used that term, and I'd like to go on record, I never said that.
Hey, Frank, this is Will one more time. Just trying to make sense, because George Zimmerman and his family, their contention is that George never racially profiled Trayvon Martin. But a lot of what I'm hearing from you today sounds like he might have, in fact, and that would have been appropriate. Is that what you're sharing with us?
Once again, we're having some sort of technical difficulty here.
I apologize.
I can't really hear the question.
I apologize for that. What I'm saying is George Zimmerman and his family have contended that George did not racially profile Trayvon Martin. But some of what you're sharing with us today sounds like you're suggesting it might have been appropriate if he had.
George did not surveil just one group of people. It was an effort on his part to surveil everyone who looked suspicious, not just, as the Times call it, Trayvon-like dudes.
And in your mind, did young black men look suspicious because there had been 8 burglaries by your count?
Everybody who just rolled through our neighborhood looked suspicious at one point after 8 burglaries. I mean, our neighborhood was on heightened alert to all suspicious individuals, whether it's Latinos, white, whatever the case is. It just wasn't specifically one group of individuals.
That sounds to me like you're contradicting what you said to me earlier, sir. Because you told me you
no,
sow
what
corn,
I'm saying
you
is
reap
you're
corn.
asking me in my mind, no,
Yeah.
you're asking me if George profiled one group of people in my mind.
Uh-huh.
And George looked at the whole landscape when he surveilled our property. It just so happened that the prior 8 burglaries were all perpetrated by young black males.
All right, we'll leave it there. Frank Taffe joining us, George Zimmerman's neighbor. Thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it. Got to take a short break. We're back in a moment.